So I'm sure someone more versed in the background lore of Star Wars than I am will already know this, but is the Hutts the name of the species? Because I always kind of assumed it was a title. Or is it kind of both? Like only members of that species can be Hutts? I don't know. Somebody will tell me, I'm sure. The Book of Boba Fett, episode 2. We continue along, and this one is actually between the modern stuff and the flashback, more heavily flashback, which I'm okay with. I still feel like it's balancing that fairly well, and I am still interested in it. And I'm still enjoying this. I don't like this episode quite as much as the first one, but that's not a massive downtick in quality. Honestly, between the first two episodes, your first episode probably should be your stronger one because that's where you have to hook everybody in. But this still works for me, and there's definitely things that I am really coming to appreciate about the way Boba Fett is being portrayed because, yes, he's a badass. Yes, he can definitely hold his own in the fight. And yes, he is not without a plan, but he is also ultimately a bit out of his element. So I kind of like when he shows up to see the mayor, and pretty much everybody there, to varying degrees, for them, this is business as usual. This is just how things work, how they run. And, he's coming in and trying to do it his own way, but they're all just like, this isn't how it works. Pay attention. And so I feel like that's generally a good thing to do with a badass character if you want there to still be stakes, is you put them in a situation that they are not used to being in, where being badass can't be the solution to everything. So that works for me. I am definitely still enjoying that. I mean, the bit with the Rancor, I called that immediately. And it was kind of funny to me that the guy was willing to get his head cut off, but not willing to face the Rancor. I suppose it might feasibly be worse, but, if the Rancor was there, it's just going to bite your head off anyways. Is it that much different if you weren't scared of the first one? I don't know. Maybe it triggered some kind of innate fear in the character character of a faceless assassin. I don't know. Reading too much into that now. I think I'm gonna focus mostly on the flashback stuff because that does take up the bulk of the episode. I'm a little bit of two minds on what we get this time. On the one hand, I kind of feel like this is the fairest shake the Tuskens have ever gotten in terms of not just being some annoyance that lives in the desert that other characters have to either work around or plow through. So it feels a bit fair on them. That said, and I got to be careful how I talk about this, but I couldn't get the notion out of my head. Structure-wise, it is a little bit of a white savior story. Now, I definitely need to explain this because people are going to jump down my throat for a number of reasons. Firstly, understand that a story can indulge in the tropes of a white savior narrative without the character in question actually being white. I'm talking about story structure here, not necessarily what color the character is. The tropes are still in place. And if you don't know what I mean by white savior narratives, these would be things, well, God, it's all kinds of things. But generally, structurally speaking, it is a character from a more advanced civilization, usually one that is more closely analogous to the people watching the thing, getting embedded with what is generally portrayed as more of an othered civilization, usually a less technologically advanced and more quote unquote uncivilized one. And, they teach this character something, but ultimately he learns their ways, but is ultimately the one helping them a lot more than they're helping him. And story structure wise, this is by far not as egregious an example because it is not, as I said, actually dipping into the kinds of direct white savior things that things like Dances with Wolves or similar stories ended up doing. So some of the direct racialized context aren't there, but it is still dipping into the tropes of the natives of this area are behind technologically. They don't understand technology. And if there wasn't somebody from this other civilization to show them how to do it, well, they would never get anywhere and might even be wiped out. It is dealing with those tropes of narrative and characterization. And maybe it's just me, but seeing those tropes being used simply because I know where they come from and how they are often used kind of makes me uncomfortable, even if this is, again, not, I don't think, the worst instance I've seen of it. But, you know, I don't know, something about taking a desert-dwelling nomadic people heavily wrapped in cloths, which could be said to be analogous to certain cultures and civilizations that either do currently or have in the past existed on this planet. I don't know. It just makes me a little, Doesn't completely shut me off. I'm not like, oh, never watching that again, cancel this. But, you know, it may be a little bit, That said, if you're gonna tell this kind of story, this is a pretty decent example of it. All things done. So it still ultimately works. I had to bring that up because it was like the whole notion was just sitting at the back of my head. I like the lizard. Like that was like when the lizard happened, first thing I thought was, oh, Babelfish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But I like that basically it was effectively peyote for all intents and purposes. They send him off on this hallucinatory, whatever. He was hallucinating and goes off on this quest that is both symbolic but also real because he comes back with an actual branch that he then forms into his weapon, which I also liked that, the whole forging of the thing, because, you know, up to this, those sticks that the Tuskens always had, they just felt like, well, that's just what they can get hold of. And I like that it was kind of imbued with more meaning, that they make their own. That honestly, the forging of this it wasn't thematically dissimilar to how Jedis go about making their own lightsabers. And I kind of like that. And it's moments like that that make me say, I think this is the closest that the Tuskens have ever been to getting a fair shake, because that felt a bit more reverent than a lot of the other stuff. Again, I don't want to dip in that too much because I don't think the Tuskens were like derided. Again, the story just dealt in tropes that I'm like, So yeah, the Hutts showing up, I mean, that's fine, makes total sense. Can I just say, like, seriously, even now, more than 20 years, more than 25 years now, after the Star Wars trilogy special editions gave us the first versions of CGI Hutts, they still don't look good. Like, they look better than that very first version of Jabba that was done back in the day, but, like, they still don't look good, especially compared to the puppet from Return of the Jedi. And, like, I get it. You've got them out, you know, physically in the world on this litter. Trying to do that practically with puppets would have been a massive undertaking and probably more expensive than doing the CGI. But I'm sorry, they just don't look good. I did kind of like that one of them, the little animal that I assumed he was going to eat at one point, he was just kind of patting his head. I'm like, is he using that to mop his sweat? This poor little furry thing that he then just tosses aside casually. I'm like, okay, that's the kind of strange and bizarre and wait, what? Like little moment that I love for Star Wars to have with its aliens. There should be little things like that. I'm like, okay, because the aliens should feel alien and weird. Another quick thing about the mayor, like random thing, because I've said my major points. Have the hammerhead aliens, has the mouth always been on the side of the head? Because I don't remember ever noticing it before. So I don't know if that's a new addition or if that is actually established somewhere. But I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. So yeah. Still digging it, still liking it. I feel like the flashbackiness to sort of how Boba Fett got into his immediate situation, also how he's dealing with it now. Honestly, while it's nowhere near the same caliber, it has shades of the Godfather, the first two Godfather movies. Like, especially if you ever saw the version, I think it aired on TV. I remember seeing it. The version that actually edited together parts 1 and 2 of The Godfather so that it was cutting back and forth between the flashback stuff from part 2 and Don Vito Corleone, being grown in the patriarch of the family in part 1 of that. This gives me that feeling, and I'm liking that. I'm liking seeing that approach and that vibe applied to Star Wars. I'm still digging this. What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon, you know the thing. Also, link in the description, plus links to all the other stuff I do, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, what have you. But, no big pressure on that. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break. Thanks for sticking around into the credits. None of this would have been possible without my Patreon supporters in particular. I want to thank Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Bookworm. Thanks for keeping this going. And to everybody,